First of all, notice that Christians need training. Christians need training. In verse 19, we read these words. After he had received his sight and received the food, he had not eaten or drank anything for 3 days. He got his sight back and was strengthened. Then it says, then Saul spent some days with the disciples at Damascus. Now, why did Saul hang around in Damascus when he had work to do? God had issued a call. He had accepted the call. He had work to do for God. But he hung around in Damascus. It's not because he just wanted to hang out and spend time and fellowship with his new brothers in Christ. I'm sure that took place to some degree, but that was not the only activity he must have participated in during those days. It was not the primary reason Saul stayed behind. I believe the majority of the time he spent there in Damascus was devoted to his training, to him becoming a disciple. And we don't know the length of his training. It appears that it was relatively short. Verse 20 says, immediately, that would be immediately after his training, immediately after he spent that time in Damascus, immediately he preached the Christ in the synagogues, that he is the Son of God. Now, some might ask, well, why didn't he spend even more time in training? Even in more formal training, if you will. And I believe the answer to that is twofold. First of all, some of his training had to be what we would call on-the-job training. While he began preaching immediately, the Bible makes it clear that he was still in Damascus. Verse 21 says, then all who heard were amazed and said, is this not he who destroyed those who called on this name in Jerusalem and has come here to Damascus for that purpose, so that he might bring them bound to the chief priest? Now, if Saul had been a seminary student, we might refer to this as his field experience or as his practicum. The second thing is that Saul was grounded in the Old Testament. He was a Hellenistic Jew. He knew the Hebrew Bible probably as well as anyone in his day. All the prophecies about the Messiah, he knew them. There was a big difference now. See, because he had met Jesus face to face on the road to Damascus, he knew now beyond any shadow of doubt that Jesus was indeed the Messiah, the one who had been prophesied about for so long in the Old Testament, the one he had learned about, the one he had been waiting for, the one whom he had been persecuting because he didn't get it. He didn't realize and recognize that this Jesus was indeed the Messiah that his people had long awaited. Now, being a former persecutor of Christians, he also knew all the claims that had been made about the Christ. The biggest change now was that he believed them. He didn't just know it in his heart, he believed it. He knew it for fact. So in reality, Saul was a good candidate for this calling because he already knew all the right stuff. He already had a lot of training. He was full of zeal, but now his heart was right. And that makes a world of difference. Everything had come together.